Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. So glad you're here. And I'm so excited because we have a very special guest here today, the one and only Anna Kloots. And we're going to be talking about her life and her fabulous new book. And let me tell you a little bit about Anna. She is a New York Times bestselling author who always dreamed of being a Disney princess, which I kind of feel like you are embodying that, Anna.
Thank you.
Her writing candidly reflects on her travels, relationships, failures, and fantasies, and it may just inspire you to move to Paris like she did. Anna adds a little sparkle to everything she does, thinks outside the box, and prefers to dance down the streets instead of simply strolling. And she can often be spotted sipping a glass of champagne in a cafe, undoubtedly celebrating something. That's probably the most joyful bio I've ever read.
Well, thank you. I just wanted it's actually funny when you're writing your bio, you're like, what do I put? And they can sound too like just a bit too like serious, like resume style to
Mhm.
me. So yeah, I tried to infuse it with some personality.
I love
And
that.
it worked.
Yeah, I mean, we already get a sense of who you are. Lots, like you said, so many bios are like, these are my accolades and these are my accomplishments, but like, who
Yeah,
the hell are
here's
you?
what I went to school. Yeah, I know. I tend to do things a bit differently.
I love that. And I love your book. So, yeah, we're here to talk about your amazing book, My Own Magic, a reappearing act. First, I gotta say, I love the cover, and I know a bit of your story about this cover, but I would love for you to share like the beautiful imagery of you in this picture. What made you decide to have this on your cover?
Thank you. I so appreciate that. I did design it myself. I had a very clear image from the beginning of what I wanted that to look like. My story is so much, as memoir is, it's self-reflection. And I wanted it to really be true to what the story was about, which is about, moving forward and about change and about, really looking deep inside yourself and figuring out what it is that makes you you and using that as power. And when I was writing this, I was revisiting so many different moments I had and trips I took. And I sort of identified that image of me that's on the cover as the moment when I really started to first accept that the life I was living, the marriage I was in, wasn't the right one. I
Mm.
spent a long time trying to deny that and trying to convince myself otherwise. And that particular day, which is an essay in the book, it's a chapter called Hoodwinked, is when I look back and realize after the events of that day, I realized I have to, this is never going to work unless I'm on my own and
Mm.
in a different life. So it was important to me that that image kind of became the image of the whole book. And I liked that this picture I had taken from that day just happened to be have this forward motion to it. I'm
Mhm.
stepping forward kind of boldly. And so I wanted to use that. And I kind of singled it out from the rest of the image and then recolored it a bit to reflect my current aura, actually, because I
Mhm.
wanted to show the change. So that's why there's like two of me. One is sort of the original coloring of the photo, which was pink and golds. And then the image that I'm moving toward is these greens and yellows, which were identified as my aura colors when I had my aura red in LA. And the text itself is sort of this reflective material because my intent in writing this and why I wrote it was so that people will see some reflection of themselves in this story, regardless of how different our lives are and how different our journeys have been. I think there are many things about the topics I'm discussing and the feelings I'm delving into that a lot of women have told me I completely relate. I wasn't able to put this into words, but thank you for doing that for me. So yeah, there's a lot going on in
Mhm.
there.
I love that. And I didn't think of that either when I was looking at it about the reflectiveness of the words. But as you're saying that, I totally get it because I saw so much of myself in your story. And I kind of did the reverse. I was living in Spain with my husband. And when I left the relationship, I left Spain as an expat and came back to my home country of Canada. But I had sort of that similar experience of realizing that this was no longer sustainable and what am I going to do about it, and then that challenge to step into my own power. And so I know so many of the listeners here are going to be able to relate to that as well, and the courage it takes to, as I even look at the cover, it's like that evocative moment of like walking into the unknown and not really knowing what's going to happen, or can you do it, and finding out what you're made of. And there's so much of that as a theme in this book, which is so powerful and so speaks to so many women.
I like that you said challenge. You said that challenge of stepping forward. And it's so true. It feels like an unsurmountable obstacle when you're on the other side, when you've yet to do it. And at least that prevented me from doing it for a long time, despite knowing deep down that I think it wasn't going to work. It took me a while to accept that. And the challenge of what would creating my own life separate of this person that I don't know what life is like without. I met my ex-husband at 19 years old. I was a kid. And that obstacle of like, could I even be on my own? Could I become anything on my own? Was terrifying for the longest time. But it's funny when you start making those steps into your own path. And even though it feels like the unknown, and a lot of people have said the same thing, how did you find the courage to do that? It had to have been so scary. And it was, but it was more scary to stay in a life that I knew what the outcome of it was. I knew I'm not happy. I'm not going to become happy magically one day. I've tried, it's not working. So as scary as it can be to take on that challenge and say, I'm going on a whole new way and I'm going to make my whole life and figure it out from scratch again.
Mm-hmm.
It's scarier to me to try to be happy in something that you just know in your heart is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I stayed 10 years too long in my marriage, and I was married at 19 too. So you grow up with this person. And like you said, you can't imagine any other life. And so I stayed so much longer than I knew in my heart I needed to, because it is such a scary idea. But like you said, eventually the pain of staying where you are becomes bigger than the fear of the change. And that's often when we're like, all right, like I'm just going to go for it. And coming back to courage and the courage it takes, I always think of courage as a skill, and you're not just born with it. You have to learn it. And how you learn it is by doing scary things, witnessing yourself doing scary things. And in your book, that's such a theme of like, the next step and the next step and not knowing what's going to happen. Did you see your courage slowly building as you went through each little step?
Definitely. And that's what's beautiful about memoir is you're revisiting these things in your life. And sometimes you don't realize in the moment how brave something you did was, or how much you learned from that, or how that propelled you into this. And in writing this book, I realized that I kind of took toll and took finally took ownership over some of these, like, yeah, I was stranded alone in a foreign country at 19 for the first time without a working phone. I didn't have a map. And I figured it out. And that's what gave me the courage to then move to London. And then moving to London with no one is probably what gave me the courage to then just start traveling. And that's what gave me the courage. It's a muscle. You have to build it. And truly, at the time I picked up my life and moved to France after that divorce, it seemed like the safest bet. Like, I know that sounds nuts, but I wasn't afraid of any of those things. I wasn't afraid of moving abroad. I wasn't afraid of going somewhere where I didn't know anybody. And I wasn't even afraid of starting over at that point, because when I looked back, I realized I have actually done all of these things before.
Yeah.
And now I'm more prepared. I have more life skill behind me.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a little bit afraid then, but I figured it out, I certainly don't need to be afraid now. I already know in some ways what I'm doing.
Right. I love that. I love that. So, can you talk a bit about why you called it My Own Magic, a reappearing act, and just a little bit about the background of the book and the overall story for our listeners who haven't read it yet?
Yeah, My Own Magic is actually something I said one day. There's a chapter in the book when I'm in Joshua Tree and I'm in a sound bath session at the Integratron. And it's kind of a moment where I'm really trying to step forward into my own career and my own life, and finding it quite difficult because I don't fully really believe in myself yet or really realize my own power. But I spend a weekend with other people who see it quite clearly and are basically trying to convince me of what I am that I don't see, that I'm not owning. And I say the words, I am my own magic, sort of in this key moment. And I wrote an essay about it, which is in the book, and I read it aloud on Instagram Live a couple years ago, and a follower responded right away and said, "That's the title of your book." And I was like, yes, it is. You're so right.
Thank you.
And I love that. I loved that because, like I said, I want things to resonate with other people, and she said right away that that's the title of your book. Like, and I think I was married to a professional magician. That's kind of what the story is about in some ways, of how I step into this box that I don't realize I'm stepping into quite young. And I start building my entire life around my ex-husband and his dreams and his goals. And I step into this role quite willingly, not really understanding that it's going to come with metaphorical handcuffs and not allow me to be able to grow and pursue passions and, sort of be my own person and make decisions and have the ultimate dream that I wanted. And so it sort of is about, breaking free from that. And then we end up divorcing. And I'm sort of left in this position of feeling scared and incapable, and very much doubting my own ability and power to be able to make something of myself and to have a new life that will be, an improvement on the life I was living. And my own magic is really me taking toll of all those things we just talked about, looking back, owning these moments where I was courageous, owning the things that I'm talented at, and accepting them, and letting myself kind of, soak in those things that other people see and accept it, and start to use that as, this is my power. This is what makes me great. These are things that I need to, these are skills that I have to own and then use. And when you do that, it becomes magic. And how quickly my life fell into place from absolute destruction was incredible. And I truly believe it was because of that. It was because of me really just deciding, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to use all of these things that I know make me great as a form of power and magic and fuel to go create this new life. And that's the message I want to share, because I think, again, regardless of how different our lives are, how different our dreams are, this is something we all underestimate: our own magic, our own power, our own skills, our own courage. But when you own it, it is, it has the ability to do crazy things for you.
Yes, preach it. I love it. I mean, I always say no risk, no magic, because it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, you've got to leap, you've got to go into the unknown and then find out what you're made of. And also, to your point, deciding, like, I'm going to decide that I have my own magic. I'm going to decide that I have powers and gifts and abilities to create a life that lights me up. And so much of it is just making that decision before you feel ready, when you still feel, scared, and just leap. And that theme, I think, is so resonant for women nowadays, who are really realizing that, wait a minute, I think I've settled into a life that isn't lighting me up. And what am I going to do about that? And do I have the courage to change this, even when it's familiar? It might not be, magical, but at least it's familiar. It's the life I know. And there's so much resistance. Comfort zone. Exactly.
But is it actually comfortable, is what you have to ask yourself. Because I was in a comfort zone that was far from actually being comfortable.
Yeah.
And I really started to realize in this, like, in taking inventory and revisiting old journals and trying to look back and being like, when are the moments where I've really grown, where I've really been happy, where some shift happened? And those were all moments where I would step into the unknown, where I would be in a place where I would move somewhere knowing no one, where I would try a new thing, where I would say, this is crazy, but I'm going to go for it. And I realized, like, actually, the unknown is my comfort zone. It might seem scary when I'm there, but I figure it out pretty quickly. And then that becomes powerful, because then you have this confidence that you would never get just sitting in the comfort zone.
Exactly. Yeah. Comfort zones are comfortable. They're familiar.
You don't grow.
But they're usually not very grow there. It's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, like you said. And then the more you do that, the more that becomes your new comfort zone of like, okay, I feel uncomfortable, but I got this.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, I started to look at it as opportunity. Like anytime I'm put in a situation where it feels like I don't know what I'm doing, then it's like, okay, this is an amazing opportunity to learn.
Yes.
And anytime I've took a crazy leap, like it doesn't always work. Of course, it's not 100% success rate, but it is in a way to me, because even you take the leap and either you make it, you get there and you're like, wow, I can't believe that worked. That
Yeah.
happened. Great. Or it doesn't work, but you've learned something.
Mm-hmm.
You learned something huge about yourself or about the world or the people around you. And that is now giving you a new life skill and more preparedness to go try again. And I think you're more likely to get up and keep trying as you're knocked down than if you just never even try.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Love it. I want to read one quote that really stood out to me that I want to ask you about. So I'm going to read your words back to you. You said, I gaslighted myself for years, making excuses for why everything about my marriage that bothered me was okay. I let that go on until eventually I completely lost sight of what I wanted, what made me happy, what I was worth, and what love really is. This spoke to me on so many levels because I felt the same way. And there's so many women who will relate to those words. But what I was curious about with that is like, did you see it at the time? Or as you said, was that in retrospect, going back to your journals when you started to be able to piece it together? What was your experience of that?
It's a little bit of both. There were certainly some things I recognized in the moment of like, I don't like the way this feels, or I don't think this is normal, or this isn't how I dream of being of my relationship
Mm-hmm.
going. But like I said, I was gaslighting myself. I was making all these excuses for why I had no right to feel that way, or why, there are worse situations I could be in,
Mm-hmm.
or there are worse relationships than this, so I don't have a right to be unhappy or dissatisfied or want more. um and it wasn't until later, when you're, especially it's hard when you're in the midst of a relationship and you love someone, you want to make excuses for them.
Mm-hmm.
You want to, and I still, I don't believe that my ex-husband was ever trying to hurt me, that he had any malintent, or that he was any kind of bad person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all the more reason to be like, he's a good person. He's not trying to make me feel this way. But at the end of the day, you are feeling this way, that, whether they're trying to hurt you or not, you are ending up not okay in a relationship. That took me some time to realize.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking back and retelling this story, I noticed so many times that I was just like, wow, I can't believe there was a day that I said, that's not a big deal, or sure, let's do it that way, or didn't say anything at
Right.
all, because of the way that I was just, quieting my inner voice, turning a blind eye to things that inside my body is trying to desperately tell me this isn't good. And I
Red
refuse.
flag.
And I know that's something we all do.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
just to romantic relationships. We do it with friends, with family. I mean, relationships are so complicated with any person who we really care about. And I think all the more complicated when it's someone that, like I said, you don't think they're a bad person. They're not out to get
Exactly.
you. They're a family member. They're your husband. They're your best friend. It's it's hard to step out of those situations and really realize I might love this person. They might not have any ill intent, but this relationship is making me feel X, X,
Mm-hmm.
and X, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like you said, when there's no big reason
Mm-hmm.
and they're a good person, there's no malicious intent. It makes it so much harder, especially if you've been conditioned to be a people pleaser or a good girl or any of those conditionings we as women so often have, that it's so hard to then find a reason to be like, okay, I want something different. And so then, like you said, we gaslight ourselves and invalidate ourselves. But when you get to the point where you realize you're the reason, your happiness is the reason, then you can step into your own power like you did. And that message is so powerful. We need to hear that from women. We need more women saying that, of like, yeah, like there wasn't a big reason, but I'm the reason.
But the funny thing is a million little reasons are almost more important than one
Mm,
really big thing. You
mm,
don't want like one really big screw up, one really big wrong thing that you can be like, well, that's the justification.
mm-hmm.
But if day to day you are living in a state of I'm not happy,
Yeah,
like that is the reason. And that's
exactly.
all the justification you need to go, I need to do something about this, instead of it's not a big deal, I just won't say anything.
Exactly. Totally. You know, one thing I love about you, I've been following you on Instagram for a few years, and I just love your Instagram, your stories, your posts. They're so beautiful. But the thing that comes through for me is your joy. And, you know, I love your relentless joy. That's how I feel that it comes through for me, is this relentless joy, this ability to see beauty and happiness everywhere, and even through challenging times. And that's my sense of what you offer to me through your Instagram. It's like life isn't always easy, but I'm going to find the joy in the small things, the big things, and relentlessly pursue that. Does that feel in alignment with you? And is that something that you've always had, or is that something new that you have found for yourself?
I think it's something that I have always had inside me in some way. My mom has I was recently looking at my baby book when I was home during my book tour, and my mom had written down at maybe like age 3 or something. She said Anna seems to immensely enjoy whatever she is doing. And like I got teary-eyed. I was like, wow, that's nuts. At 3 already, my mom was like, doesn't matter what she's doing, she's having the time of her life. So I think it's somewhat innate, but I haven't only had a life of just happy times. There have been some really sad moments in my life, some really complicated things, some loss. And for me, choosing to see the light through those moments is really important, and they almost magnify the brightness to me.
Mm,
Um, like when you're in a pitch black room and you turn the light on for the first time and the light is almost blinding. You
mhm,
almost can't even open your eyes because it is so, so bright compared to that utter darkness.
yeah.
But then in time, your eyes adjust and it's just light and you just see it as light.
Yeah.
I love that moment. And I feel like it's the same when you experience joy out of something dark,
Mm,
because it's so bright that it's blinding. And when you feel that, when you've come through something really dark and those lights go on again, I want to try to live in that moment forever rather than just let my eyes adjust to the
mm,
joy and beauty around me. And that's honestly the way that I look at life. I am always looking around, not with adjusted eyes, but with eyes of, I just came out of a pitch black room and everything is so bright and beautiful.
wow. I love that perspective. It's a choice, isn't it?
I honestly believe that it is,
Mhm,
because there are certainly some days that I'm doing really fun, magical things in which it would be impossible to not be having a good time.
mhm,
But I am pretty much in that same state if I am also just having a normal day in Paris where I wake up and grocery shop and come home and work and cook dinner. Like I really do think you can choose the way in which you see the world, the way in which you interact with other people, the way in which for me, it's a lot about just counting my blessings. Like
yeah.
after watching my brother-in-law in the ICU, just
Mm,
any day that I am able to wake up and go on a run and move my body, I feel so completely grateful to be able to do
mm,
that.
mhm.
And I like I said, I don't let my mindset adjust to to that. I
Yeah.
am constantly counting my blessings and saying I have no reason to be anything but joyful today.
Yeah. It's a choice. It's an awareness. It's going through the dark, like you said, and choosing to be in that light flash moment. And one of my favorite parts in the book is your story of your brother-in-law, Nick, who said something to you on your darkest day when I think it was when you just left your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you share that story? Because it's so powerful.
Yeah, I was my husband sort of asked to end our marriage kind of more or less out of nowhere, and at least the moment that it happened. And we were in New York in the apartment his family owned, so I just left. I had nowhere to go, and I went up to my sister Amanda and my brother-in-law's apartment, and I just stayed there all day and cried. I don't even think I spoke. And at the end of the day, Nick came over to me to, say goodnight, gave me a huge hug, and looked down at me and said, "Annie, best day ever." And I thought I was being sarcastic. And I was just like, like,
Okay, sure.
see, a joke. And he was like, "I mean it. This is the best day of your life. This was holding you back. You get to live your own life now. And I can't wait to see what you do with it." And it was just honestly the most helpful and most poignant and beautiful thing anyone said to me, because when you feel so depleted and awful and low, and especially like, the person I loved had just walked away, I felt discarded and unwanted and just totally useless. And of course you're going to feel like that about yourself. That's normal. I felt like that about myself for a while. But when the people around you don't look worried,
Mm.
that's a pretty good sign that you don't really need to be as hard on yourself as you're being. And he was so collected and calm and just was looking at me like, "This is the best day of your life. If you don't see it yet, but I see it. I've seen it for a while that this wasn't right for you. And I can't wait to see what happens next, because this is the day you're free."
Wow.
And I wish I've wanted to tattoo that on myself.
Yeah,
Literally, like,
right.
it's it's such a special thing. He was great at small, short deliveries like that. Like, he just always saw what was really going on and had the perfect thing to say.
Mm.
It was the perfect thing to say.
Yeah, it's always so hard to know what to say to somebody when they're going through something, and we're always so awkward about it, and tiptoeing
Yeah.
around or whatever. But when you have someone just give it to you straight like that and really speak into you and your potential and your power and your purpose, like what a gift that is.
Yeah, I always say, when someone is, the worst thing you can do is mimic them. I'm already walking around like this.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing you can do is, "Oh, I'm sorry." And it's our gut instinct, because
It
you
is.
see someone sad, it makes no sense to be like, "You got this, don't worry about it. It's your life." You feel insensitive, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually like to remind someone of their own strength and power in that moment where they feel so small and shrunken.
Mm-hmm.
To me, is the best thing you could ever do. And everyone fears. I say in the book, I didn't even want to be around people, because I just felt like everybody was, if they talked about me, it would be in these hushed tones, and "Did you hear what happened?" And like, how,
Mm.
and no one wants to be the topic of that conversation.
Mm-mm.
So I was avoiding people, because I didn't want that. I didn't want people talking to me like I was a sad puppy. And I know my sister felt the same way, experiencing a completely different type of loss.
Mm-hmm.
And we have both talked about that moment of like, when the people just show up who've got a smile on their face, and they give you a hug and remind you that, there will be a day that you're smiling again. It's the best thing you can do for somebody.
Love that. It's so simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love
Think
that.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you about this because this is the Selfish Woman podcast. So we're all about women finding their power, prioritizing themselves. But you said something really interesting about this in your book. You wrote that you realized that giving to the right things will never leave you feeling empty, but more full than you could have imagined. And I love that so much because, so many women have been conditioned, like I said, to be selfless, to be a people pleaser, and we give to the wrong things or we give to the wrong people. And then we end up overwhelmed and burnt out. We end up enabling or codependent. So I love that you seem to realize that it's not about just never giving to anybody and only giving to ourselves, but giving to the right people. And, I think that's something that's really interesting that not a lot of people talk about is like, are we giving to the right people? And how do you know that? But I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about that, of how you realize like maybe you were giving to the wrong things or people, and who you really needed to give to besides just yourself.
Well, I arrived at that thought because when I moved to France, it was, a few months after my marriage. I had been I built my whole life around my ex-husband and honestly done absolutely everything for his career, and would really put myself on not even the back burner, like the back
The
burner.
way back.
I'm a frying pan still, like in the cupboard, like just hoping one day someone will pull me out of there.
Right.
And so when I finally then decide to go to Paris, I almost did it in a way to put distance on purpose between me and the people I loved. My family was all in New York. My parents had just retired and moved there, and two of my four sisters had just had babies. And I was like, I know what's going to happen to me if I stay here. I am going to sub out my husband with my mom and my dad and these babies. I mean, I was already spending all my time babysitting because it makes me happy to do that for people. It's not even that I want to do things for myself and I choose others. It's like I genuinely really enjoy taking care of the people I love. And it brings me fulfillment to help people. So I knew what was going to happen. And I was like, I got to get out of here. If I'm ever going to actually build a life of my own, I need to actually not know anyone in the country I'm going to that I can do things for. The only way I'm ever going to wake up and say, you have no one to take care of today but you. So what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And I lived that life for about 6 weeks in France before COVID happened. And then I had to go back to the US and I moved in with my sister while my late brother-in-law was in the ICU. And I was essentially taking care of my 10-month-old at the time nephew and helping my sister. If I had thought my life was devoted to someone before that with my ex-husband, I think this was just a totally different ball game.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay, goodbye, selfish life, I thought. And for a minute, I really mourned it. Before I went to help her, I was afraid. I was like, what's going to happen to me? I was supposed to be selfish this year. I was supposed to take care of me. And I was very much aware that I wasn't at all whole yet. I was still a mess in many ways. And now I had to go give everything to someone else again. And my whole plan of being selfish was up in flames. And I was like, God, this is just not my year. Like that I thought it was going to be.
Damn it.
And then, the situation became critical, and the amount of, the help I was giving was just completely from the heart, without any hesitation, without any, pushback on my like inner end, And I realized that difference because right away, what I was doing and who I was helping was not like taking from me. And that was really what made me realize it more than anything. Like all the help I used to be giving to someone, the selfish, the selflessness wasn't filling me up. It was making me feel depleted. And I don't know if that's more just because that relationship wasn't the right fit or because of the way that it was or wasn't being acknowledged. But I find myself in a situation where I'm actually giving a lot more, and yet I am being filled up. And in giving, in taking care of my nephew, in being with my sister, in watching an entire first community of people step in and then half of the world step in, it made me realize that differentiation. And I think it's something we all can use as this scale of like, you don't have to say I'm only going to be selfish, but if you're giving everything to someone and you're not feeling good about it, then that is a sign that you're not giving to the right people. You're the boundary isn't there, or you're being taken advantage of, or you're not being appreciated, and you deserve those things. You deserve boundaries, you deserve appreciation, you deserve acknowledgement. And if that's not happening, then that, you know, became a huge red flag to me of like moving forward, because I am this kind of person. I'm going to take care of whoever's in my
Right.
life.
Right.
But it became a big learning curve of like, if I'm not feeling good about the help and about the service, then this isn't a good relationship.
Yeah. And it comes down to self-trust then, doesn't it? Of like, how do I feel inside? Does this feel right for me? And trusting your intuition and trusting yourself to know where is the right place for me to be giving.
And you can't do that if you're not fully listening to,
Exactly.
to you, if you're gaslighting yourself, or if you're not fully aware of what you deserve.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us aren't. I mean, I wasn't. I kind of knew, but at the same time, I was just so willing to let that shift, to
Mm-hmm.
accept less, to say, okay, well, maybe this is what I wanted, but maybe that was a ridiculous expectation and I should just adjust down to this and then adjust down to this.
Mm,
You have to put up those boundaries and establish what it is that you need, and then be very bold about protecting that.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Okay, so I have one last question for you. I feel like there's a lot of women, well, I know there's a lot of women who are going to listen to this who want their own reappearing act, who know they need it, who know that it's time to step into the unknown. And, maybe they're not going to be traveling. Maybe they're not going to be, able to go and remove themselves and go to a different country, but they long for this experience. What would you say to them? What would you want them to know when they're at that stage that you were at, where you felt like, all right, I gotta go and I gotta do this for myself?
I, I think the biggest thing would be is to first believe it's possible. If you're just sitting there telling yourself, I wish my life could change, but it won't. I wish I could do something bold and courageous, but I can't. You know, I want a completely different life, but it's never going to happen for me. That's the most absolute toxic thing you could do.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that what we tell ourselves every day becomes our reality. So you have to stop telling yourself can't, won't, not possible, and that it doesn't happen overnight. You know, part of the reason I shared this story is that you see it's like it's a multi-year thing where the career I have now, the life I have now was in the making for 7 years of this story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that, you know, it's so typical to see someone on the other side and go, oh, that must have been so easy for them. It will never be that easy for me. But when you really see the work someone has put in and how it was this slow process of first getting to know yourself. I did a lot of work getting to know myself and then re-getting to know myself after I left my marriage and going, what do I even want? Because I don't remember anymore what
Yeah.
just wanted before I started sacrificing everything for a relationship. But that step of saying, I'm going to start taking care of myself, I'm going to start doing things for me is really important. And that, you know, dating yourself again, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
still in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, you have to really get to know yourself. And it's easy to let that go to the wayside and completely lose touch with who you are. But the first biggest step I think I did to end up where I am was really re-identifying it. You see in the book when I kind of write my bucket list is kind of that moment where I was like, what do I even want?
Yeah.
And I was so lost as I couldn't even come up with it out loud. But as I
Yeah.
started writing, it poured out of me.
Yeah.
Some of those things were big and crazy, like I want to write a book and I want to live in France again, but some of them were small. I want to take dance lessons. And like that's something you can do tomorrow if you decide you want to. And you know, because you can take them online. Like
Yeah.
everything is there's so many things that are actually really possible and really easy to achieve, but they seem big and insurmountable in our heads. And when you look at here I am at life now, and this is the life I want, it looks really far away. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of baby steps at getting there. And if you don't start walking in that direction, you're never going to get there. So you
Yeah.
have to just believe that it's possible and start taking steps in the direction of getting to know yourself, taking ownership of what makes you awesome, and using that all as fuel to start
Yeah.
building towards the life that you want.
Totally love it. Believing that you're awesome And just deciding it, like, I just decide I'm fabulous.
Writing it and saying it out loud, even if you're just saying it to yourself in the mirror
Right?
in the morning, like instead of looking in the mirror and tearing yourself down, which is what we
Yeah.
all do. Oh,
Yeah.
this, and my hair is this, and I'm too this. Just instead look in the mirror and go, I'm awesome. That's a
I
huge,
know.
huge mindset change. And it sounds ridiculous, but it is powerful.
It's so powerful. Just change how you talk to yourself. And it is hard. But like you said, put a post-it on your mirror. I'm amazing. And just start getting
Yeah.
comfortable with actually saying that to ourselves, saying the truth. I love that. Okay, I lied. I have one.
Talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend.
Yes.
When your best friend
Right?
starts venting to you, oh, I feel this, or my hair looks so dry, whatever the silly complaints are that we do to each other. Do you say to your best friend, like, yeah, you're right, you could use
Pretty rough.
this, or yeah, your wrinkles are really bad right now. No, you start lifting her up. You
Yeah,
start lifting your friend up. What are you talking about? You're crazy, you're amazing. Da, da, da. That's what we need to do to ourselves. Talk to yourself
exactly.
like you talk to your best friend.
Exactly. Be our own hype woman.
Mhm.
Okay, I lied. I have one last question because I have to talk about your book tour because it looked so much fun. Like I'm watching it on Instagram and I'm like, this is the best book tour ever. Like you're on
Thank
boats
you.
and you're dancing to ABBA. It looked so fun. So what was your favorite part of the book tour?
Oh my gosh, I can't pinpoint one stop because they all were incredible. What my favorite part was just getting to meet everyone.
Yeah.
I truly didn't realize how amazing the community I have is because I don't get to see your lives.
Uh-huh.
I'm sharing everything all day long, but I see your name in a bubble and a
Yeah.
lot of people I've chatted with, but I don't get to know everything about you. But in getting to talk to them, and they're showing up in sparkles, they're wearing hooray for shirts, they're in pink, they're making friends in line. I was like, where are we all going after this for an after party? Because I want to hang out with everybody. It was so beautiful.
Hmm.
And especially, I mean, you've read my book, so like I started my Instagram account because I didn't have a community.
Yeah.
And what attracted me right away was I'm living this isolated life with my ex-husband. And I saw this as a way to connect with people. And I started meeting friends through Instagram, and I started building a community. And to finally get to really like meet that community all
Hmm.
over the US was, I mean, I was in tears every night by going to bed, just like, I can't believe how awesome everyone is. And that
Wow.
200 people just showed up in pink and glitter to watch me talk about my book. Like
Yeah.
it was so beautiful. It was,
Mhm.
I could have kept going and going and going. Like, you guys are funny. Like everyone, aren't you exhausted? I was like, I'm not exhausted. I could do this for the next year. I
Wow.
loved it.
Yeah, it looked like so much fun, and yeah, just a celebration of
It was.
joy. And I think that's to my point of what I said at the beginning of my sense of you is, you're this light and you're joyful, and that's what the book tour felt like for me watching it was like this is just a big party and everyone's there to party and hang out and have fun, and isn't that the best, right?
Yeah, it was better than I could have ever imagined. It was fabulous.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, Anna. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I like you said about community, I feel like you're evidence that social media is also very good and positive. We got to find our own little positive corners.
Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
bad, but it can be so incredibly beautiful.
Absolutely. And you're bringing the light, and you're bringing so much hope and, possibility to others through your book. So just thank you for me, from a reader. Thank you for sharing your story because it really meant a lot to me. And I know it's going to mean so much to everyone who reads it.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that you took the time to read it and that it resonated
Oh, for
uh,
sure. Yeah.
and thank you so
So
much for talking with me today.
yeah, everyone go buy your copy of My Own Magic by Anna Kloots. And thanks again for hanging out, and take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.